again, and welcome to the Dietitian Against Diets podcast show. I'm your host, Rashonda Thornton, and we are now in season 2 of this podcast production. And so as we're getting ready to roll out all our guests, I want to introduce you to one of my long-term podcast partners, Undeniably Dairy. And if you haven't heard of Undeniably Dairy, it is a part of Midwest Dairy Council, and they're putting out ways of messaging the ways to give yourself nutrients when it comes to how you incorporate healthy dairy products in every meal and every snack. And when we think about dairy products, it's not just about milk. It's actually composed of several different products that can provide the same non-essential nutrients, being protein, calcium, and potassium as a few. So if your goal is to start this 2021 year off, start with planning and implementing more healthy foods and healthy sources in your body, and that comes with implementing more dairy. So whether it's a simple string cheese stick, create a smooth, fruity Greek yogurt parfait, or even just adding milk to your smoothies, go actually to dairygood.com, and you'll find some of these recipes, some nutritional information that will give you the equipment that you need to know that you're making the right choice when it comes to your nutrition. And also find ways to be creative in how you're feeding yourself. Find them on their website at dairygood.com, or follow them on Instagram at Midwest Dairy. So in addition to that, you've seen me several different times talk about how we're going to start, not just changing our perspective, but learning how to place it intact when it comes to our nutrition, our wellness, how we feel and care about ourselves. So I got a question for you. We have 2020 behind us, and now we have 2021 in front of us. And I know everyone wants to start off with their New Year's resolutions, but my question for you is, what are your plans for the new year? And is your plan something that's going to be short-lived, or is it going to be something long-term, long-sustainable? Because when you make plans, they can go either direction. You can either move forward by making goals and executing them, or you can stay stagnant by just getting by, but never really truly step up to the plate of what you want to do and what you deserve for yourself. Or you can go the opposite direction by going backwards with ignoring the fact that change has to happen. And of course, there's no surefire way to meet any goals, but whatever you tried in the past, ask yourself, has it worked? And if it hasn't, ask yourself, what other approaches can you take to ensure that they do work, especially for this given year? So as you should know a little bit about my background, I've been a consultant dietitian for the last 8 years and been in the wellness industry for over 12 years. And I work with hundreds of people in regard to their nutrition. I help people with customizing and developing a new way of approaching their nutrition, not trying to change their old ways, but giving them a new perspective on how to tackle this lifelong struggle they've had with food. But also talk about struggles, help to teach them how to overcome their personal struggles. And by doing so, building a new relationship with food that is more so self-serving and not self-sabotaging. So again, I'm a dietitian, and working with a dietitian, it would always ensure that your nutrition would never be compromised. There's no food groups going to be taken out. We're not taking half the calories out of our day. Our body needs those particular nutrients just to live. And so teaming up with someone, a healthcare professional that has that knowledge, that has that ability to help you, that's what you want to seek for your long-term changes, whether it's your weight, your health, or just clean eating practices. So me personally, I see to it that your life and your healthy eating are aligned to where they're like living a harmonious life. I always say marry nutrition to your life. So that means instead of fitting you into this system or program that may not really be you, I'll build your program around you. And so what does that mean? That means your mindset changes away from past eating cultures. You begin to recognize all the little and big things that have been holding you back. And you'll finally be able to jump off that roller coaster of weight gain and weight loss. So this particular month in January, I want to extend and commemorate my 12 years being in the industry and offer a 12% discount for anyone that wants to partake in any of my services. If you want to learn more about where you can find what I do for a living and my services, simply go to my website at www.rashondathornton.com, or follow me on Instagram at The Dietitian Against Diets, or you can find me on Facebook at Rashonda Arbella Bessel. Get on there, jump on there, read a little bit about me, kind of see what aligns with your thoughts and your goals, where you want to be, And take that next step and let's have a conversation. I offer 15-minute free consultations just to see where you're at, what you're looking for, and then seeing if it makes sense for us to work together. So find me, contact me, and reach out, and I would love to start your next journey of health for yourself. So stay tuned and get ready for my podcast guest coming up soon. Thank you. Well, happy 2021. This is the Dietitian Against Diets podcast show, season 2. I'm your host, Rashonda Thornton, and I am excited to just open up this platform to so many new guests that have unique perspectives, and they all have perspectives and missions and services all built around self-care and self-love. And so with this gentleman to my right, if you see here, his name is Ricky Van Pay. I'm going to give you a little bit of his little bio, but I'm definitely going to let him take the reins after that. So he is the owner of Fitpastors Academy. But what stands out that he has a powerful story of changing his health from growing, and I'm using his words, from a husky kid to being an unfit pastor to becoming a triathlete / Ironman. So there's a lot of things bundled up in that transition of his life. But what's most important, he has taken his ministry to help other pastors that struggle with their own personal struggles of their health, of being healthy, and offering an opportunity to transform them through his coaching practices. So Ricky, I want to just introduce you and say welcome to the podcast show today.
Thank you very much, Rashonda. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. And now we were talking a little bit before the show started, and I was just telling him, how unique, the different things, the things that he has done, and how he's actually has found this niche that there's a high need, and I personally can vouch for that. I know within the ministry, as far as leaders, there is a huge need for our leaders to be in the healthiest position they can be so they can better lead. So I say teach and help leaders lead better. So what we're going to do for this particular podcast interview, I want to focus on the topic of the lifestyle. I'll put air quotes around that we grow in, how it influences our thoughts and actions, and how we can make steps to change the story of our life. Because a lot of times, as you can probably agree with me, Ricky, we're a product of our environment in regards to just how we think about things, how we look at things, how we grow up, our mindset, and it really, really has an influence on who we are as adults. But it doesn't mean it's too late to change that. And when, when I read your story, I want, to just really pick your brain on just how you came about this change in your own personal life. Because you went from moments to a lot of self-reflections to just making solid decisions of what you're going to do. So, like, when I'm sure you apply that to a lot of your things when you're working with with your pastors and with the people in your organization. How has your life, how have you used your life to reformat that to help others in their lives?
Yeah, growing up a pastor's kid, I grew up in that environment of a pastor, and so I saw the rhythms of that, the stress, and just how you deal with things on a day-to-day basis. So then I became a youth pastor, and I just, it's one of those where I think a lot of ministers in my tribe were so busy taking care of God's temple, the body of Christ, the church, that we neglect our own temple, our own body specifically. And I fell prey to that. And man, I don't know how much of that story you want me to share, but I put on about 75, 80 pounds in a couple of years' time. And that kind of led to a couple of wake up calls for me and making a change. And, several years after that, God began to send me down a path in what I'm doing now. And so it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, you don't just as a child say, this is what I endured to do. It's not one of those, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. I want to be a firefighter when I grow up. Like your decision to take this road just came from this life, generally speaking, and I do concur with you when you say that within the leadership level, as far as our pastors and ministers, their calling is to serve the people. But I also feel like, because I'm not a PK, but I'm a PGK, pastor's grandkid, right? So I grew up in the church.
Right.
My grandfather had 4 churches, as a matter of fact. So it was a common thread of just different churches. But again, it's one of those things. I grew up seeing You always want to feed your pastor, show him love and respect, and it comes through a form of food. And
Yeah.
unbeknownst to the people, their goal is to show love and gratification. But the food that they're providing is not necessarily the healthy food that's going to keep their pastor alive or at his or her best health. And so I know that that's something that I personally have seen, as in that realm. And so as something as you've seen it, you asked how much of the story you want to tell. I really feel, to me, it's how you grow up. And if you grow up seeing that, you really don't really know what caused until it's too late sometimes. And so as you've been a preacher's kid, you're seeing, the constant influx of food, or even just the focal point being on your work versus yourself, your work as far as what you're doing versus yourself. Like, to me, that's a part of, like, no one teaches you that you also need to take care of yourself in lieu of that, and especially in the ministry area. So for you, like, I know that you had your aha moments, but was there someone within the community that kind of nudged you, or was it just something that you just woke up and decided, hey, you know what, this is just not, like, how did that aha moment come to you?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit of a combination of both. I found myself as a youth pastor, and my first initial light bulb was, back then a lot of pastors wore suits. Uh, and I was getting out of the shower and, obviously didn't have a shirt on, and looked at myself in the mirror and was like, good Lord, who are you, man? Like,
Hmm.
I remember thinking, you're not looking good. And my back was hurting. And I went to put on my suit coat and I couldn't button the bottom button. And it was about a week later that I went to a doctor's checkup and got my blood drawn. And I always encourage pastors right before I'm about to coach them, hey, we all sing in the church about there's power in the blood. Well, there is power in the blood. Go check out your own blood and get your numbers, to see where your blood pressure's at, see where your cholesterol. So I did that. And at 24, 25 years old, the doctor was like, do you realize how high your cholesterol is? And I was like, no. He goes, it's not good. Do you realize where your weight is? It's like, you're on the verge of being obese. And when I heard the word obese,
Mm.
that was hard to go. And so I was, I was in the midst of doing some weekly youth pastor lunches every Tuesday. I don't know if you have them out where you're at, but we have a place called Rose's Cafe, and it's a
Well, I heard
Mexican.
about your affair with Rosa.
Yeah, man. Every Tuesday, me and some youth pastors would go for Taco Tuesday. And I remember meeting one of the other youth pastors, and he was running a little bit here and there. And I told him, I'm like, dude, I'm not in a good place. I'm about to have my first child. I want to be a dad. That's a good example. He's like, Ricky, come over to my house and we'll go for a run. Well, Rashonda, what I didn't realize is he was going to go for a 5 mile run. I wasn't even walking at that time.
Okay.
So I showed up to run, and we went out about a mile, and I was struggling. And I stopped and I go, is this the out and back? Like, we've already gone out a mile. He's like, no, man, I'm going out like another mile and a half. And I said, bro, I can't do that. And I had to
Yeah.
walk the whole mile back. But that was a starting point for me. I ended up doing a little 10K with that same guy.
Uh-huh.
And he really helped trigger a switch in me at that time.
Well, you know what? Before we, because I know where that road's going to take us, and before we do, I want to still take a pit stop on this, because I really feel like this is the area where people do struggle with their own version of roads in their lives. And
Mhm.
so, like, even just that concept, we look at how we look at food at certain times. We look at it as something that's fueling our body, fueling our temple, versus sometimes just something that's satisfying our tongue.
Yeah.
And I think, you're similar to your story. Like, you spoke about, you love going outside of Taco Tuesdays, you love the sausage and chips, and, like, it's just, you were finding yourself addicted to it because it was comforting, it was familiar, it was cozy, but deep down inside, you didn't, this was not self-serving, you know and so a lot of people struggle with those roses in their lives. So how would you go about, helping people, at least get the conversation going that's in their head, to help them to discern, if this type of relationship they're having with these certain foods is going to, how to break that affair up, I guess, another way of saying it.
Yeah, Rosa was definitely an affair. And you said it. I would stick my needle with an arm of salsa. And I was sniffing chips. She was my drug addiction. And I think my conversation would be, it's one of those slogans we've heard before, hey man, it's not what you're eating, what's eating you. And
Hmm.
and what was eating me was pressure. I was in a good sized church, and there was a lot of expectation, and there was a lot of engineer people in my church, and I had parents really kind of looming over me. And so I ran into the arms of Rosa as kind of a way of comfort. And,
Yeah.
food is never going to judge us. It's always there to comfort us. It's always available. So that's where I kind of turned when, nowadays I relieve some of that stress with exercise instead of food.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's just asking those mental questions and breaking that down a little bit first, and then going from there.
That's the area that I specialize and I deal with people is their relationship with food and their mentality. And I know it's not everything we see on the surface. It's always it's like you said, it's what's eating you. There's something, there's an underlying conditions that hasn't been addressed. And I like you said, food is something that we can't not eat. So we have no choice. So we're going to be interacting with this thing that we fill our bodies with. But how can we redefine that relationship? I don't want to say replace relationship, redefine it because once yes, food is there, it's a constant. We can depend on it, but how we can turn into a partner to where it is something that is serving us as we're serving it, and that changes what that food looks like because you don't want to not hate food or feel guilty or fight food. You want to change of what that particular food is, and that change is called nutrition. You change your food into nutrition, where you're seeking those types of foods that are going to be comforting, that are going to be make you feel more confident. That's going to that you don't have that dark cloud over your head of I know this is I'm going down a rabbit hole with this whole thing. I'm drawing in my heart and my thoughts into this food, but how can you turn it over to where you're selecting certain foods that's more self-serving and that's going to be more positive than negative? And again, it's an act that doesn't happen overnight. And I'm sure for you didn't break up with Rosa overnight. It took some time. And I think that was even another thing that in our conversation about how people see the end product, but they don't know how much time it took to do that. And so I know that you use, one of the analogies that you used when you're on your bio was that you looked at being a minister, a youth minister, and being in the ministry. You look at the sacrifice that Christ made. He stepped out of heaven to help his people, and as leaders, as being pastors, how are you following that same path? And I think that's something to think about because their sacrifice is going to have to be made, but this is sacrifices being made for the greater good.
That's right.
Yeah. And so kind of give me some insight on how you align that part, that the action of Christ, coming to help his people and translate that to your pastors when you're talking about their efforts and what they're doing for their people.
Yeah, I mean, he led the way. He led the charge, and just in his physical health, there's not a lot of detail in that in scripture. But I just kind of was curious one day because something I want to do in the future is just kind of dissect the Gospels from a spiritual, emotional, mental, physical health
Okay.
standpoint. Just really dissect Jesus's life. But so one day recently, as a matter of fact, I Googled, how many miles did Jesus walk during his years of ministry? And a lot of historians, theologians believe that when he turned 30 in those 3 years of ministry, he walked every day approximately 20 to 22 miles a day. So Jesus was as
He had to be.
physically fit as you can be. Thus, he endured everything he did on the cross. Like he had to be in really good condition and shape to endure the flogging and the crucifixion. And so Jesus was in a place where he could do the amount of ministry he could do because he was healthy enough. And I've heard of people in my world where they've come to me and said, "Hey, is there any way you can help us with some of our missionaries? Because they're in assignments in these other countries. They don't have access to 24-hour fitness and Gold's Gym in these other countries, but yet they're having to hike places and they're overweight. They
Mm.
don't have the energy to do it. And we're having to take them off the missionary field." So that just boggles my mind, that their physical is going to get in the way of their calling. And so I have a real heart for that to say, hey, man, we got to do something about this. This is about the kingdom. This is about reaching people for Christ. And not that you got to turn into a gym rat, not that you got to start doing competitions. You don't even have to run a marathon. But man, what has God called you to do? What's your mission? Who's he called you to reach? And if that's a big vision, then how are you going to have the longevity and how are you going to have the energy to fulfill that mission?
Oh man, that's pretty deep right there because that is so true. If you're being tasked or you've been called to do a certain thing, how can you fulfill it 100%? If if something what if not, what is slowing you down to fulfill that? And again, you have to have the energy, not just the energy physically, but mentally too, because you even had a capacity to take on the load that others are going to put on your back, being able to have them to make the decisions that can make or break anything, and also being able to do everything from the visits and the meetings and the travel and the, being able to speak. Like all it takes is mental work as well. And if we understand our body and its capacity, how can we expand that capacity to do any of those things that we're not physically taking care of ourselves or even, nutritional wise taking care of ourselves? So that's a concept that, again, no one told you this when you was a PK. No one told your dad, I'm sure. No one told my grandfather.
Yeah.
My grandfather said he had 4 churches, and unfortunately, he died of a triple heart attack, something crazy.
Yeah.
And it's like all that work from from one man, and for his life to, at the end of the day, that's what his life boiled down to. And it could have been prevented if we had some of these new approaches to health within this level of ministry. Yeah. I have a question for you. Now, I've seen, some of your certifications. You're certified in swimming, cycling, running, triathlon. You have a lot of different. Again, if someone was to see your resume, they would feel like, and they would see some of your past pictures. They'd be like, okay, now how did this really, really happen? But it also looks like it's almost impossible to even to do. So with that being said, again, everyone has a story to tell, and it takes time for change. It doesn't happen overnight. What do you consider the essence of any change, spiritually and physically?
What do you mean by essence? What
So,
specific?
so I guess I use myself as for example when I work with people as far as their nutrition, and for me the essence of change is to know it takes change, which
Mhm.
means that it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be smooth sailing, but
Yeah.
but being uncomfortable sometimes is that nudge you need to get you to the place you want to be. But
Mhm.
the investment that you're making of being uncomfortable of what you're going to get on the end product is well worth it. So for me, my essence to help, as far as what creates change is change first. Just the mindset that change has
Yeah.
to happen. Now, there's not defined. There's a spectrum of change that can happen, but just know that that's a piece of how this is really going to act, how this is really going to happen. So for you, because you're working with, you're coaching, obviously pastors, but I'm assuming that you have to be coaching other people because you're
Mhm.
certified in all these other areas. And
Mhm.
and when you're working with them, and they're first thing to think about, how can their changes, let me physically change, just only let me lose the weight or change my health status and improve it. But it's deeper than just a physical change. It's more, the remnants of change comes different from just running or swimming. And so for
Yeah.
you, just to throw the question back at you, what would you
Mhm.
consider the essence of any change? It doesn't have to be just exercise. It could be your spiritual change as well.
I think, when someone identifies that there's a problem, there's got to be an acceptance of a problem, and I just call it a problemology. And for my tribe, it's that 76% of pastors are unhealthy and overweight. There's various reasons for that, but that is the reality. And so either you're a part of that stat, you're a part of that status quo, or you're not. And if you are, then do you want to remain there? Or do you want to make a change? And then once you decide, okay, I accept that there's a problem, then we got to start creating a whyology, and that is going to keep you from the long term. And the whyology is simply, why do you want to get healthy? And I list off things that are big for me. There's a lot of different reasons, and for me, it's hereditary. I don't want to follow the steps of grandparents, like you mentioned, your grandpa, and I don't want my ministry days to fall short, because of heart issues when I can do something about it. The other one is I have 3 kids. I want to be a dad that can go hiking with them. I want to get out on the trampoline with my little girl, and when she wants to ride her bike, I want to get out there and ride with her. So, when those days get hard and when it does get uncomfortable, because it will, when it gets hard, and you feel tempted to fall off the health wagon, you can go back to that whyology and say, no, I have a calling on my life. I want to have longevity. I'm doing this for my kids, my grandkids. And so a lot of pastors, they speak in front of large crowds week to week to week. And I've had pastors say, Ricky, I'm so insecure that I'm pulling out my shirt. It's getting stuck between my rolls, and so they said it's distracting, and I hate it. And others, I've had pastors just get real where they're in tears talking to me in coaching sessions because they don't feel attractive sexually to their spouse. And so that is huge. That's
Mm-hmm.
something no one ever talks about, but it's very real and it's very important. So it's really diving into those, digging deep. And I'm sure you do that too. You just keep digging and digging and
Mm-hmm.
digging till you find those things that are really causing friction between the health and the unhealth. And you find that, and then you just shine a light on that
Hmm.
and say, okay, if you don't do something, what's going to happen there?
Yeah.
And let that sink in. And if that won't create change, I don't know what will.
And I like what you said. Once you start digging in deep, let's shine a light on it first. We're not
Yeah.
saying jump in there, pull it out, and start fixing it. We don't know how to fix it yet,
Yeah.
but at least we are aware of what is that nut that keeps the wheel turning in the direction we don't want it to turn. Let's figure what that out. Let's figure out what that is first. Open it
Mm-hmm.
up and take some time to evaluate it, and then start figuring out how can you change that, because if you can that one little piece that's rooted to everything that spirals off of it could be the only thing that's missing. And everything else gonna follow in tow. But so many people live their lives, and Ricky, I'm sure you can agree, especially
Mm-hmm.
in the position where you're held to the highest regard. You're not expected to be tired. You're expected to be the first person someone leans on a call when they're in need. Like, this is your calling. So we don't think about pastors or ministers having personal lives and personal insecurities and having personal struggles, and they do. They're human. But when you're kind of pressured to have this, you're in this position, then you don't take the time to pull back those layers and really figure out what is really happening that's causing this this to happen in your life, physically, emotionally, and everything like that. And sometimes we just glaze over, we address it later because we don't have time. And I think that's important. And I think when you're talking about your coaching, and it takes time to pull that stuff back and just to see what it is first. Now let's see what it is. Now let's figure out how we're going to approach it and how we're going to address it. And it's
Yeah.
still maybe a trial and error, but at the very least, we have seen it. We know what it is now, so we can figure out how we're going to start cracking that little nut.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned something um, about the pastors and feeling insecure, and this is actually just falls right in line with the next question I was going to ask, because a lot of people don't change too because sometimes they don't really know what it is that's causing it. That's reverting to our previous conversation. But sometimes they don't feel like they're worth it or they're capable, or if what they truly want does it is it really as important in comparison to everything else in life. And so I find they find themselves putting themselves to the bottom of the totem pole. So how can you, especially in a position for pastors, or just just anyone generally, because everyone is listening to this podcast, this is great information for them. For those who just don't feel like they're worth it or they're capable of making those next changes, how would you encourage them on their path to change?
Yeah, I mean, I just internalized that myself. And when I first started Fit Pastors, I had a very respectable older pastor come in one day and he said, the number one thing that you're offering isn't all the health stuff. It's that you have a ministry that is simply encouraging pastors and affirming them. And that's their greatest need because
Hmm.
they always feel like they're not enough. They always feel like their sermon wasn't good enough. They always feel like they got to compete with the church down the street to keep their membership.
Mm.
And they're always in the spotlight. They're always being critiqued. They're the conversation at every Sunday lunch. And so for me, it's encouraging and affirming and breathing life into them and reminding them that at the end of the day, are you a pastor? Yeah, but you're a human being. You're a
Yeah.
dad, you're a husband, you're a child of God. And that is the piece of getting back to the fact that we're all just sons and daughters of God, and learning how, if David in the Old Testament had a heart after God, I mean, anyone that has seen his life knows he wasn't the greatest dad. He wasn't the most pure guy, but yet the Bible says that he had a heart after God, and
Mm-hmm.
there's I relate a lot to him because he was a roller coaster of emotions in the Book of Psalms, and but he learned to encourage himself in the Lord, and we have to have that personal relationship with God, filling our soul each and every day. And one thing that I really coach on to pastors is I really hone in on their Sabbath. That one
Okay.
day a week where you need to escape away. I challenge them to get into nature. I'm big into nature and hikes, and just getting one with Mother Nature, and more than that, getting one with God,
Mm-hmm.
getting quiet, getting still, and reminding ourselves that our identity is not from what people say on social media. Our identity is found and validated and approved in what God says about us. And He loves us, He cares about us. I love uh, before Jesus did anything in His ministry, when He was baptized, He hadn't healed one person, He hadn't done a thing yet. And God sent His Holy Spirit down in the form of a dove, and He said, "This is my Son, whom I'm well pleased." He's pleased us
There you go.
because of who we are, His child, not because of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just reminding ourselves of that.
Hmm. I like that. And again, this is the messaging that you're transferring over to those pastors. I think that's the validation that they need. That no matter, you know, I didn't even think about the different forms of pressure or competition that they deal with. That shines another light on why it's even more of a service that needs to be provided for those pastors. And for you being one specifically, you definitely can relate and you totally get it. So as we're getting ready to close, but I do want to just give you the opportunity to um, talk about. I know that you started your company. Was it what year did you start the academy?
It was around 2013,
Yeah, I thought it was
2014.
2013. About
Mm-hmm.
7 years strong, 7 to 8 years strong. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so even though we know this is a unique niche, and there's a high need, we need 5 more of you. What are your long term goals of this mission overall?
Yeah, I've started something called Fitpastors Academy. It's a year-long course, and it's a year long because I believe it takes that long to change behaviors and create habits, to create a lifestyle sustainable. Um, After a year, they'll go through that. They'll become an alumni.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of getting week to week coaching, they'll go to month, where it's just kind of like a tune up, check in, just to make sure they don't fall off the rails. And then they'll also have the opportunity to become a coach. Like you just said, there needs to be 5 of me, 25, 50, 100. Long term, I hope that thousands and thousands of pastors get coached, get help. Long term, obviously, my big dream, call it crazy, but I see what Dave Ramsey has done in the church world with finances. Man,
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to be that guy in the physical health world, and
Nice.
just, create uh, not just a Fit Pastors Academy, but Fit Church Academy, where I go in and
Okay.
speak on a Sunday and then just offer resources to help create energy and collaboration in the church, where, you gather anybody and everybody that has any kind of passion for health, and you start providing classes just like on what you do. Teach them on a Wednesday night or in a small group
Mm-hmm.
about nutrition and how to cook healthy, and sharing recipes, and offering a group class at no cost.
Yeah.
No memberships are required. So, and I'd like to go beyond just the nation here in USA. I'd like to get more into the other continents, where there's missionaries out there that don't have access to some of the resources we have, and through online video and that kind of thing, create some change there too. So I'm excited.
Wow. Well, I'm all behind you on this one. Again, this is an untapped niche, and but it needs there's just such a need, and when I ran across the things you've done, I'm just amazed because I've seen it, and I'm on the same path with you. So as people are they're hearing about it, but tell us how can we connect with you, find you, follow you, any programs you have in the making, so kind of what do you have coming up for this next year, what do we need to know?
Yeah, yeah. So this week, right now, beginning of the year, we've launched the winter season of our coaching. It's broken up into 4 seasons. So, somebody's a pastor or a staff member, just anybody that's impacting the kingdom. They don't necessarily have to be a lead pastor. It could be a chaplain or working in different. I mean, if you have a heart for God and you're reaching people in that way, and you're a leader, this is for you. And so it'll be. We'll enroll a new season come the spring. It'll be toward the end of March.
Okay.
Anybody can jump in there. My website is being rehauled entirely right now to just kind of take all the content and all the curriculum and all the videos and just make it more seamless and more easy. I'll be creating my own podcast here toward the end of this year. I'm going to invite you to
All right,
be
I'll be
on that
there.
with me, so we can exchange positions there. But yeah, just for now, just it's easy. Just jump on Facebook, look up Fit Pastors Academy. You'll find us. I'm on Instagram, Ricky Van Pay, or through Fit Pastors, and they can just begin to have a conversation there. Anybody can jump in our Facebook group and just get their feet wet there, and
Okay.
just have a bird's eye view for a few months. And then if they think it could be a fit, they can jump in and become active and be enrolled in our academy.
Nice, nice. Well, Ricky, I again appreciate you just taking a moment, and I'm assuming that your schedule is as busy as anyone else. Is taking a moment to just
Mhm.
talk through, being vulnerable, talking about your personal story, but use that as a way to help others know that it's not going to be an easy road starting off. But in order to change, you want to apply change. But also, how are you connecting to the greater good? It's not just about not about self, but what are you doing for others in the meantime? So I appreciate you taking that time to be on the show.
Yeah. Looking forward to having you too.
Yeah, I will be there. Yes.
All right.
Well,
Awesome. Awesome.
again, thanks to have someone like Ricky on here. We are coming with these unique speakers that have something powerful that they want to spread to the world, and Fit Pastors is definitely going to be one of them. So keep your eyes open. If you want to learn more, go to Facebook at Fit Pastors Academy. Find Ricky at what's the IG handle bar again?
Just Ricky Van Pay on Instagram. You can find me
Okay.
there.
All right,
Yep.
and find him on there, follow him, see what he got going on. He has something coming up in March. So keep an eye out, and not only for yourself, but I'm sure that other people that really could use this type of service, type of coaching that can transform their lives if they're transforming others. So find them, follow him, be a part of their mission, and make sure that you stay healthy. So again, this is the Dietitian Against Diets, all about building that healthy mentality of how you fulfill not just your health, but your spiritual growth, your emotional growth, And learn what real freedom is when you treat your body well, and you eat well. So thank you guys again, and I will see you next week. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. It's always a pleasure to have like minded individuals on this platform talking about their own personal journeys, but how they have expanded it to help not just themselves, but for others. So if you want to continue to be a part of these conversations, please share, subscribe to this podcast. If you know someone else that you know would greatly benefit, please, I want to encourage you to share the news with those others to help them to find those ways to help them on their nutrition journey. As a dietitian against diets, again, it's not about the diet, but it's the diet mentality that we are rearranging and creating a new pathway for healthy living that's sustainable, that's self-serving, and that helps us to find that true level of happiness that we've all been seeking. So until next week, I'll see you again. Take care and have a great week.